Exercise 3-3. In this exercise, we're going to count how many times we had expenses on a given day and what was the total expense amount for that day. So we start with June 1st. To calculate how many expenses we had on June 1st, we're going to use a function called COUNTIF. COUNTIF takes two arguments. The first argument will be the range that you want to count. And what we want to count is this range, which contains all of the dates. So that would be A5 to A31. And we want to count how many times the date June 1st appears in this range. Because for every time the date June 1st appears, that would be one expense for that day. So the value June 1st, we could actually type that in. But since it's a date value, it's not easy to type in a date value. We're just going to compare it to whatever is in this cell, which is E7. Because E7 also contains June 1st. Close parenthesis, press enter. And you'll see that the answer is 3. And if you double check here, you'll see that we do have 3 items for June 1st. So that seems to be correct. Now we want to copy this formula to the rest of the rows so that we don't have to type the COUNTIF function over and over again. So before we copy, we need to put a $ in front of the row numbers for A5 and A31 so that these row numbers will remain fixed. But for E7, we'll leave it as a relative reference so that when we copy it to the other rows, E7 will become E8, E9, E10, E11, and so on, and that will coincide with the correct date for that row. So now I'm ready to point to the fill handle and copy it to the rest of the rows. And now it calculates how many expenses there were for that date. And I'll just use SUM function to calculate the total expenses for the week. And we had 27 expenses. And that's the use of COUNTIF to count how many times a cell in a given range meets our criteria. Now let's calculate the total expenses for each day. To calculate total expenses, we're going to use a function called SUMIF. Now SUMIF takes 3 arguments. The first argument is the range that you want to evaluate or apply your criteria to. And just like COUNTIF earlier, the range that we want to evaluate is this range because it contains all the dates. And we only want to sum the expenses for a given date. So we need to apply a criteria to this range. And that again will be A5, A31. Our criteria is that the value in this range should be equal to the date that we want to calculate the expense amount for. So the date is in E7, comma, and the range that we want to sum. So in other words, every time a date appears in A5 to A31, which is equal to what is in E7, which is June 1st, we want to include whatever is in column C in the sum. So the range that we want to sum is C5, C31. Okay, let me check that everything looks good. Okay, so SUMIF takes 3 arguments, and now I press enter. And the answer is $2,081. So we had $2,081 in expenses for June 1st. And now I'm going to put a $ in front of the row numbers here, A5, A31, C5, C31, so that when I copy this function to the other rows, okay, you'll see here for this SUMIF, the first argument is still A5, A31. The third argument is still C5, C31, but the criteria should be that it's equal to whatever is in E8, which is June 2nd, because E8 is a relative reference, so it will adjust. Same thing here. Okay, so the numbers look good. I'm just going to sum. Okay, and the total expenses for the week will be $116,066. And if you want to check that your answers are correct, you could also do a sum here to see that they match. C5, C31. Okay, the answer is the same. We could even do a count here. And the answer is 27. So that matches what we calculated up here.